The officer takes an obscene bite of an apple, but the captive pulled out a grenade and chewed on it. Looking at his captive's cheap look, the officer was furious. He punched the man in the stomach. I thought the captive would stop, but he started to vomit. He even pulled a long ribbon out of his mouth. As the ribbon was pulled out, I didn't realize it was a German Reich medal. The officer immediately became nervous, asked what was going on, but at that moment, the sound of an alarm went off again. The soldier was in a hurry to turn it off, but then the clock was pulled out of the prisoner's ass. The soldier was astonished. How could his own clock be on his captor's body? He raised his fist to strike, but the next moment, seeing that the captive was not in any danger, and the soldiers let their guard down, they laughed like clowns, but they didn't realize it was all a plot by their captors. And then, the captor continued his performance, but suddenly he turned and fled in a hurry. Was this his plan? The officer immediately gave the order to the soldiers to go after the captive, but just as they reached the door, he found the man running out with a barrel. The tension was instantly relieved. The soldiers swarmed around, and laughed and played with the captive, but the moment the barrel fell, a strange thing happened. The prisoners disappeared into thin air. They searched anxiously back and forth, but they couldn't find them at all. But suddenly, a few catcalls came again. The soldiers followed the sound and looked immediately. They didn't realize it was another joke by their captors. They let their guard down again. They were still discussing what kind of magic it was, but the officer was getting more and more scared, because all the performances of the captors were not the work of a human being. So the officer said no more. He came to the hostage, and immediately threatened the captive to come down. Looking at the girl's sad appearance, the captive agreed to surrender, but the next moment, the officer stayed where he was. He didn't expect the captive to come down like this. All the soldiers immediately surrounded him, but just when they thought the captive was dead, unexpectedly turned their heads. They realized that the girl had disappeared. The officer quickly alerted and shouted, but suddenly, with a frenzy of bullets, all the Germans were dead, and the only surviving soldier was completely dumbfounded. But the terrible thing was, the captive came back to life. He slowly raised his arms. The next moment, a bullet was fired in an instant.